Welcome to the Explainer, everyone. Now, before we really dive in, I want you to just take a deep breath, slow down for a second, and step into a much, much quieter world with me. Today, we're exploring the mind and the canvas of a true visual poet, Edward Hopper. Hopper wasn't the kind of artist who used wild, avant-garde manifestos or chaotic splashes of abstract color to grab your attention. Not at all. Instead, he spent his entire life quietly observing. He watched how the late afternoon light fell across a crumbling brick wall, how an empty diner felt at 2 a.m., and he stared intently at those solitary, isolated figures framed in city windows. What he did was capture the profound, quiet, and sometimes genuinely aching sense of isolation that comes with modern American life. So let's just jump right in.
It's a completely paradoxical question, isn't it? Why is it that we can feel so utterly, completely alone while we're physically surrounded by literally millions of people? I want you to let that universal question just kind of hang in the air for a moment. Think about it. You're crammed into a subway car or you're walking down a bustling street, brushing shoulders with hundreds of strangers, yet you feel like you're existing in your own little bubble. This paradox of modern urban life, this feeling of being entirely enclosed in a personal universe despite the crowding of the city, is exactly what Edward Hopper dedicated his entire artistic life to translating onto canvas.
To really get Hopper, we first need to understand his roots in something called social realism. Now, back in the early 1900s, when artists like Picasso were in Paris literally tearing up the art rulebook with Cubism, Hopper was doing something entirely different. He was walking through the Louvre, studying how Rembrandt painted shadows, and obsessing over Edgar Degas and his very specific, almost voyeuristic way of framing a scene. And here's a really fun fact. Hopper actually made his living early on by drawing commercial advertising illustrations. That background gave him an incredibly sharp intuition for cinematic framing. He absorbed those delicate, beautiful French Impressionist techniques for painting light, but then, and this is key, he brought those techniques back across the Atlantic. He didn't use them to paint romantic European vistas, he used them to paint the cold, stark, honest, and sometimes incredibly desolate everyday reality of America. He wasn't interested in romanticizing things, he wanted the raw, quiet truth of daily life.
Chapter 1. Voyeurs of New York, the window as a stage.
Okay, Hopper was absolutely fascinated by this concept of the urban voyeur. You see, when he rode the elevated trains through New York at night, he would look out the train car windows and peer right into the illuminated, uncurtained windows of strangers' apartments. He was capturing these fleeting, incredibly cinematic glimpses of private lives. This painting right here, his 1932 masterpiece, Room in New York, is the absolute perfect example of this perspective. I want you to really dive into this image with me. First, let your eyes drift right to the center of the canvas. Notice that solid, heavy wooden door. It is physically and metaphorically splitting this couple right down the middle. On the left, you've got the man. He is buried, absolutely entrenched behind his newspaper. He's built this impenetrable wall of text between himself and his wife. Now look over to the right at the woman in the red dress. She's not playing that piano. Look closely at her posture. She is just aimlessly, almost unconsciously tapping a single key with one finger. It's a brilliant symbol of the profound, stagnant emotional desertion happening within this marriage. And check out the lighting. The entire room is bathed in this really warm yellow-toned light, right? Usually, in color psychology, yellow implies warmth and coziness. But Hopper uses it to create a massive tension. That physical warmth violently clashes with the freezing cold, totally disconnected emotional reality of the couple. The window frame literally acts as a theatrical stage, turning us, the viewers, into passengers on that elevated train, just briefly catching a glimpse of a relationship that is entirely flatlined.
Chapter 2. Undercurrents in the City. Proximity without connection. So, as we'll see, this intense emotional distance isn't just trapped behind the closed doors of residential apartments. Hopper was a master at showing us how, even in crowded public or professional spaces, physical proximity absolutely does not equal human connection. Let's put 1940s Office at Night under the microscope. First off, look at the geometry of the room. Notice how the perspective is intentionally distorted? The floor seems to tilt upwards slightly towards the back. This is a classic modernist trick Hopper is using to immediately create a sense of vertigo and psychological tension. It makes you feel a bit claustrophobic, like these two figures are just trapped inside this brightly lit high-rise box. Now let's talk about color and composition. The heavy green of the carpet forms a really cold, sterile contrast with the deep blue of the secretary's dress. And look at their dynamic. They are just feet apart, but there is absolutely zero eye contact. Yet the air in that room is completely thick with unspoken tension. See the open window on the far right? A gust of wind is blowing in, rustling the blinds, and has actually blown a piece of paper right down onto the floor near her feet. Notice how that same breeze is pressing the blue dress tightly against the woman's figure. That wind isn't just a weather detail, it is a massive, brilliant metaphor. It represents the suppressed, unacknowledged emotional or perhaps even romantic undercurrents swirling between this boss and his secretary late at night. The rigid professional office structure is physically intact, but the wind is threatening to blow all those boundaries completely away.
Moving on to 1939's New York movie, Hopper takes this idea of isolation within public spaces and dials it up to an absolute 10. This painting is a masterclass in contrasts. Let's break it down. On the left side of the canvas, we get a glimpse of the silver screen. You can see the audience huddled together in the dark theater, entirely bathed in the cool, blue, flickering light of a shared collective fantasy. They are escaping reality together. But now drag your eyes over to the right side of the canvas. Standing there, bathed in the warm yet incredibly isolating glow of those ornate wall lamps, is a blonde usherette. Look at her posture. She's leaning against the wall, hand resting under her chin, her eyes cast downward. She is completely 100% insulated from the Hollywood magic happening just a few feet away from her. The architecture of the theater, that thick, heavy column, literally divides the canvas, separating the dream world from her stark reality. In a massive room absolutely packed with people who are sharing an emotional experience, she is entirely stranded on the shores of her own isolated thoughts. You can almost feel the heavy silence surrounding her amidst the noise of the movie. It's breathtaking, really.
Chapter 3. Nighthawks. Eternal Alienation.
Okay, here we are, the climax of our explainer. This is Hopper's undeniable masterpiece, Nighthawks, finished in January 1942. Now, context is absolutely crucial here. This was painted just weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The entire country was gripped by this suffocating wartime anxiety, and Hopper perfectly crystallized that collective urban isolation onto this single canvas. I want us to spend some real time here, so get comfortable and really look at this piece. What is the very first and arguably the most terrifying detail you notice? There is no door. Look closely at the diner. Follow the sleek, curved glass all the way around. The people inside are entirely sealed within this glowing glass terrarium. And we, the viewers, we are permanently locked outside on the dark, empty, threatening street. Now let's talk about the light. Hopper was fascinated by the relatively new technology of fluorescent lighting. This is one of the very few paintings where he captures its harsh, completely shadowless glare. It casts this eerie, almost sickly yellow-green hue across the sidewalk. It illuminates everything with clinical precision, but it offers absolutely zero warmth. And then, look at the figures at the cherry wood counter. Focus on the man and woman facing us. Look at their hands resting on the counter. They are inches apart. They almost touch, but they don't. That tiny gap between their hands is the loudest part of the painting. And what about the man sitting with his back to us? He is reduced to a heavy, dark silhouette, the ultimate anonymous city dweller. These four people are physically occupying the exact same tiny, brightly lit space, yet they are separated by vast, uncrossable oceans of eternal alienation. When art critics and journalists asked Hopper about Nighthawks, he gave this incredibly profound yet understated response. I was probably unconsciously painting the loneliness of a large city. Just let that breathe for a second. He wasn't just rendering a 24-hour diner on a corner in Greenwich Village. He took the abstract, heavy, invisible concept of loneliness and gave it a physical body. He painted the very anatomy of isolation.
Chapter 4. Edge of Civilization and Light. The Rural Works. Now, while Hopper is most famous for his melancholic New York streetscapes, he and his wife Josephine actually spent many of their summers out in the country, particularly up in Cape Cod, New England. But here's the fascinating thing. Leaving the crowded city didn't magically erase the sense of isolation in his work. It just changed its flavor entirely. The key to understanding Hopper's later work is contrast. In the city, Hopper painted claustrophobia. He painted people boxed into apartment squares, surrounded by the harsh glare of artificial street lamps and neon signs. But out in the country, in his rural pieces, he painted the exact opposite. He painted infinite, overwhelming emptiness. Under his brush, natural sunlight becomes blindingly bright, sharp, and sometimes even surreal. His rural paintings highlight just how tiny, fragile, and temporary human civilization actually is when placed right next to the overwhelming vastness of nature. Let me show you what I mean.
Take a look at this 1940 piece, simply titled Gas. Look at the incredible tension Hopper builds into a simple twilight scene. On the right side of the canvas, you have this crisped, clean, orderly geometry of the gas station. Those bright red Pegasus gas pumps are glowing warmly under the artificial canopy light. It feels safe, right? It acts as this tiny, fragile checkpoint of human order and civilization. But then, let your eyes follow that dirt road to the left. Look at where it goes. It winds away from the safety of the lights and completely disappears into a massive, looming wall of deep, dark, untamed woods. The solitary gas station attendant is standing literally on the border between two worlds. He is at the exact edge of the safe, brightly lit realm of human order, standing right on the precipice of the unknown, wild, encroaching darkness of nature at dusk. It is literally the very edge of civilization.
As Hopper grew older, his work started to strip away the unnecessary details, moving closer and closer to pure abstraction. This is Rooms by the Sea from 1951. Look closely at the door on the right. Do you notice the incredibly surreal, almost dreamlike treatment of the space? There's no porch, there are no steps, there is absolutely no transitional space between the house and the world outside. The door opens, and it drops off directly into the infinite, uncontrollable expanse of the ocean. Now look at the light. See how that incredibly sharp, blindingly bright geometric block of sunlight violently slices across the empty white walls and the bare wooden floor? This painting is stripped of almost everything. There are no people, there's no furniture, it is just the stark, dramatic confrontation between human-ordered architectural space and the boundless, eternal void of the sea. And what connects them? That sharp geometry of the sunlight. It's the only bridge between the human world and eternity.
Chapter 5. In Loneliness, There is Light.
As we bring this journey through Hopper's world to a close, there's something absolutely vital I want you to take away. Edward Hopper is so often, and I'd argue a bit unfairly, slapped with the simplistic label of being the painter of loneliness. But that is only half the story. He wasn't just documenting sadness or despair. Not at all. What he actually did was find a quiet, melancholic, and deeply profound beauty within that silence. He found a strange kind of comfort in the solitude. Because as you'll see if you look closely at any of his works, Hopper didn't just paint loneliness. He painted the light that accompanies it. Whether it's the harsh, sickly glare of a fluorescent bulb in a midnight diner, the warm, intimate halo of a desk lamp in a cold office, or the blindingly sharp morning sun cutting through an empty room by the sea, the light is always, always there. It acts as a constant, gentle, and eternal companion in our most solitary moments. It's a reminder that even when we are sitting entirely alone by the window of our own lives, we are still held, still embraced by the geometry of the light around us. So I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you wake up at 2 a.m. with a heavy heart, or you find yourself sitting quietly alone in a crowded room feeling totally disconnected, ask yourself, are you truly isolated from the world, or have you just accidentally wandered into your very own Edward Hopper painting, just quietly waiting for that inevitable light to find you? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.